Okay, everyone hear me now? Someone give me a thumbs up or say something in the chat. Okay, I got a thumbs up. Appreciate it. Well, thanks everyone for coming out today. Today is April 14th. This is the April 225 meeting of Our Revolution, Howard County. Just a brief agenda. We have a standard ground rule. So basically, be nice is the short version. We'll go through some introductions and we have some brief committee reports, and then we'll jump right into the panel and love to get right to it. Generally speaking, if you're on the Zoom link, please stay on mute if you're not talking to avoid any background noise. If you raise your hand, we'll let you say something. And during the Q&A portion, we'd like to keep our questions brief to the point, so we have the panelists a chance to respond and be nice. So not too many people here, so I think it's just worth going around just to see who's here, and feel free to throw in anything about where you are, how you learned about our revolution, and what types of interests you have. Can we start with you? Yeah, if you don't mind.
Do I need to stand up?
Actually, if you want to, but the microphone's here, so we'll be able to pick you up.
My name's Helen. I live in Howard. I live in Ellicott City. I found Our Revolution Howard County on Facebook. What am I interested in? I'm interested in I don't know, like there's a lot. In preventing deportations and just not having to live under current status quo. Anything else I would like to share? Not really.
Okay. Well, glad to have you.
Hi, I'm Jonathan. I live in Gwinnett, Baltimore County. I've been to several meetings. I'm interested and care about labor, unions, the rule of law, due process, those things.
Okay, everything that's being trampled on right now. All right, great. Gentleman in the back.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brian Dennis. I'm the organizing coordinator for Our Revolution. I just came to support, let you all know that if you all need any help or anything, reach out to me. You've probably seen emails from me about actions and stuff like that that we're doing. You've seen stuff, but just came to support.
Well, thanks for coming. Gentleman in the middle.
Yeah, name is Hal Ginsberg. I'm actually from Montgomery County. There's so many critical issues right now, but probably the most important to me is to do what we possibly can to stop the genocide in Gaza. And I want to come to this meeting because I really want to find out if our revolution's theory of change is now including supporting alternative or emerging parties beyond the Democratic.
Fair enough. All right. Denied, you're on the.
Sanad, how are you? I live in Lebanon, Maryland. I'm part of this organization, so that's, I don't know how. And nice to meet you all.
My name is Brian England. I've lived in Columbia for about 50 years. I'm the Howard County Citizens Association board. And you just piqued my interest. It just popped up somewhere, and I thought, well, if you've got a different approach, let me come and see this, how you go about it. As I said, lived in Columbia for a long time. I'm sort of a unique city, and really I'm on the forefront of trying to make sure it goes on to the next generation. And I'd love to see that we walked in, and this is Marvin Thomas' room. I did know Marvin Thomas, and he was a really good guy. We were lucky to have a library system because of it.
Appreciate that. And then I think we have a new person. I think you just walked in.
My name is Roxanne Sweetland, and I'm with Friends of Latin America. And yeah, someone from our group posted information about this.
Okay, well, thanks for coming. Let's see who's online. Let's see. Ying, did you want to briefly say hello?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Geevarghese. I'm the current vice chair for Our Revolution. I'm interested in this topic because just like everybody else, everything is being shredded, and I would like to hear what we can do together to at least slow down the slide.
Okay, and see, I think Leslie Salgado.
Hi, I'm Leslie Salgado. I have been ill for about 4 years. I'm sorry. So I have been out of participating more actively with all of these wonderful groups. And I thank our revolution for continuing to carry the torch. And I'm here to listen. Unfortunately, I thought the meeting started at 6:30 and I only have until 8 o'clock. But I'm happy to be here. Thanks.
Well, happy to have you. Let's see who's next. I have Joseph online.
Good evening, everyone. This is Joseph Geevarghese. I'm the executive director of Our Revolution. Honored to be with all of you tonight.
Okay. And Ida will be introducing you as well a little bit later, but if you want to say something quick now, that'd be great.
Muted. Sorry. I'm Ida. I'm from Greater Baltimore Democratic Socialists of America, and I also organize nationally as part of the leadership of our Career Socialist Working Group. I really wish I could make it in person today, but I could not find a ride. But big fan of y'all's chapter, so happy to be here.
Well, happy to have you online. Make sure no one's in the waiting room. Okay. Well, appreciate the introductions. So our chair, Kat, will be here shortly. She's actually in the middle of running for a position, and so she's taking care of some business with that. You heard from Ying, and Francis will be here later as well. And I'm Robert. We also have Sanad here in the audience. And just want to point out we are having elections next month. So anyone interested in running, check your email. There's links to sign in to be a candidate. If not getting that email, approach one of us. We'll make sure that you have that opportunity. And what's next? Okay, so we get through committee reports. Francis is not here, so he and I we're working on getting an actual official Howard Revolution Howard County bank account, and so that's all finally settled with CQ credit union out here in Maryland, and so that's finally underway. Malik, you want to talk about
Hi guys, my name is Malik. I am an at-large member and I handle Palestinian and international solidarity work that our REV does. And I don't think it's going to be a surprise to anyone, but there's a lot to cover on this area. We didn't have enough room for one slide, but just to cover everything, but I posted some of the more important things. So the first topic was mentioned last time as well, which is as of February, the largest numbers indicate that Israel has displaced roughly 40,000 Palestinians in the West Bank, and it's basically attempting to turn the West Bank into another Gaza. I'm sure by now those numbers are completely outdated and it's much more. So on the US front, I'm sure we've all heard the name Mahmoud Khalil, a pro-Palestinian activist who was kidnapped by ICE on March 8th, 2025. An immigration court recently ruled that he, in fact, can be deported, and that has a lot of long-term effects on all of us, whether you're a citizen or an immigrant. If the US government can deport someone for free speech who is an immigrant or on a student visa, they can absolutely do so to even, average everyday citizens. Along with that, Israel is continuing its genocide of the Palestinian people and taking over the Gaza Strip. And on top of that, the US President Trump, has indicated on multiple occasions that he would like to see US troops as a peacekeeping force in the Gaza Strip. And I just want to point out that one of Trump's talking points while he was running is that he is not a warmonger. He's going to pull us out of foreign wars and all that stuff. And now we might be at war with Iran in a few months. There's talks about a war with Russia, not Russia, my bad. We're best friends with Russia now. With China, there's just all sorts of conflicts that are brewing that the US is going to pay for. And yet, apparently, we don't have enough money for a Department of Education. And of course, I'm sure you guys have all heard about the tariffs that are taking place across, that the US is implementing across the world. As a result, different countries like China are implementing their own tariffs on us. And this is going to have a long-lasting effect on our economy, not just within our lifetimes, but experts have said that this is going to completely reshape global relations. Already we see other countries, the EU, also China, Japan, and South Korea have made their own deals with each other saying, hey, we'll work together to counter US tariffs, which side note, if you don't know anything about the relationships between Japan, China, and South Korea, the fact that those three countries enter an agreement to work together to counteract the US's economic aggressions, that is something that I didn't think I'd see within my lifetime. And yet here we are. Upcoming actions. Well, Howard County for Free Palestine is going to be doing a visual this weekend. For Palestine, more information is going to be about that on Howard County for Free Palestine's Instagram. Furthermore, we are going to continue showing up at the Board of Education, the Human Rights Commission, and the County Council to push for Free Palestine, for a ceasefire resolution, and on top of that, many community members have indicated that they'd like to show up to talk about ICE kidnappings, which are happening not just in other states, but here in Maryland as well. I'm forgetting the name of the woman, but there's a 52-year-old Maryland resident who was recently kidnapped by ICE. If I remember correctly, ICE showed up at her home. She managed to get them to go away, but as she was in her car with her daughter, they broke her window, dragged her out, and a Trump official referred to this 52-year-old mother as a member of MS-13. So that's where we are at. I could go on about this all day. We could talk about Sudan, which there's a genocide happening over there. We could talk about Congo, a lot of stuff happening around the world. But more information of that will be coming in the future. For now, I'll turn the camera back to my camera.
All right. Appreciate that, Malik. Let's see. All right, Right to Strike Committee. You can see the summary on the board. We don't have the committee chair here, so we don't have any additional updates at this point. That's basically some moves to change some legislation in Maryland. We have the Howard County Risk Stabilization Coalition. A lot of work there has been trying to form tenant unions, particularly within apartment complexes that have poor conditions. And so we've had a successful union already, and so that's looking to expand. Kat has been following the Columbia Association, so she has a Substack that she uses to, she watches these 3-hour meetings that are online, and she basically gives summarizations and some commentary on that. So if you want to know what's going on in Columbia, that's a good thing to keep track of. And then for anyone who also like to get involved, we have a number of committees. I'm happy to talk to anyone more about those. And those are always available. Few links. So we have a link tree with all the relevant social media links. So we just started up a Discord channel. We also have a Signal chat for members. So if you want to kind of keep track of the day-to-day activities, then feel free to join those. Oh, and thanks to Alexi as always for our website that we've been wanting for years, but just recently got. And again, we are having elections next month. So any interest, we have, we're looking for two co-chairs, a vice chair, secretary, treasury. Then we also have at-large members for anyone who wants to, contribute, but not necessarily be a, if you have a specific interest, that's what we use our at-large members for. Okay, so we will get into the main meat of our meeting. We have Ida online, and we have Joseph, and we have Eduardo. I think the see if I can get you on the camera.
Should I move closer?
Yeah.
Actually, you're on the camera now, so
Okay,
we're
good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Worked out. Okay, so I want to just welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us today. We had some pre-questions just to kind of kick things off, and so we'll give you guys a chance to introduce yourself and your organization. So I guess we'll start with I guess we haven't heard from Eduardo since just tell us a little bit about your organization and what your current efforts are relating to the current political climate.
Well, my name is Eduardo Ribeiro. I'm a resident of Howard County. I live in Floral, close to Savage. I'm an immigrant myself from South America, from Brazil. And I'm a member of Friends of Latin America. We call it FOLA to shorten it a little bit. And it's an organization dedicated to promote more awareness on the situation in Latin American countries and to struggle for more social justice and just relations between the United States and Latin America. So we are a small organization, but with very active, very principled and dedicated members who are very familiar with what's going on in terms of grassroots social movements in Latin America and try to bridge those organizations, those movements with social organizations, social justice organizations in the US as well. And what we've been doing is what we have always been doing. We didn't change much. We don't change much from, a Democrat administration to a Republican administration because the issues are much more deep than, who's in power at that moment. So we've been doing the same thing, trying to raise awareness on American interventionism in Latin America, which is at the root of much of the immigration issues that we have in the United States. Countries that have been sabotaged by both Democrat and Republican administrations in Latin America, and now are sending all these immigrants here. Some of them welcomed, quote unquote, by the previous administration and now being demonized by the current administration. But all the roots are there in American imperialism. And in that sense, both Democrats and Republicans tend to act in a very similar way. So we are, of course, aware of what is going on. Of course, we are dedicated to making sure, people know the injustice that have been committed by this administration, and also make sure people don't forget that much of the machine that's being used now against pro-Palestinian protesters and immigrants have been built by both parties. It's a bipartisan effort. So it's to keep things, keep it real would be a little too cheesy to say it, but to keep it real, I would say so, that we need to be aware that once you give fascism a little space under a Democrat administration, that will just build up. And then, the most openly fascist politicians will take advantage of that. So careful with what kind of social repression apparatus you build, because that's going to be used by whoever is in power. And sometimes the people in power are not very good.
I definitely agree with that. Joseph, can we go to you next? Tell us about you and your organization.
Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Joseph Geevarghese. I'm the executive director of ORHoCo. ORHoCo was founded after Bernie's first presidential run to continue to organize the progressive movement, really on three things. One is electing progressive champions at all levels, not just focusing on Bernie and the president, but focusing on down ballot races. For example, just a week and a half ago, we helped, keep 3 seats out of 4 on the St. Louis City Council, which we have a governing majority. And so, what things that don't necessarily get in the headlines, our members and our organizers are engaging in. Another area is Democratic Party reform. We were active. Our members are active in Democratic Party at all level. I see Ed Fishman here. He's active in the Montgomery County Party. And the last thing that we do is we try to focus on strategic organizing, trying to make sure that we get our voices heard on the key issues that matter. So, all that being said, I think we're in a very unique and dangerous situation, given that, I would argue we're in a situation where we have people who are a class of people who are going for broke. They see environmental catastrophe. They see, the rapid development of AI, and other threats, existential threats to humanity and life as we know it on our planet. And they want to extricate themselves from this, right? They are, and I think that's what's challenging. We've helped empower a class of billionaires, right? Democrats, Republicans helped funded the companies like Tesla, like Starlink, like SpaceX, that created billionaires. And now those billionaires are coming home to roost. They see something very dangerous happening. And rather than say we're all going to be in this together, they're trying to extricate themselves. And when I say that, I mean, we can talk further, but they believe in creating a society that is purely libertarian, that is not covered by any rules or regulations. And President Trump actually said he was committed to helping the billionaires create these things called freedom cities. And that's what's dangerous is we have a group of people that we've allowed to get really powerful and then we're in a position where they've taken over our government and they're using it to jam their policy ends.
Welcome. Thanks again. And Ida, could you tell us a little bit about you and your organization and what you're currently doing in opposition to the administration?
Sure. So I'm with the Democratic Socialists of America. Similar to our revolution, I would say we did exist prior to the Sanders campaign in 2016, but barely. After that, a lot of socialists of various, ideological schools of thought saw opportunity in building a big tent organization because you had a lot of people from that campaign who had never thought about or been introduced to socialism, at least not in a positive light. And just hearing the simple presentation that Bernie Sanders gave, the fact that this is a class war, the fact that there's like constant international fascism being waged by the U.S. state, and like a lot of these things were presented to a wide range of people who previously didn't think that was possible in politics. So you had this like fusion of much more already radicalized people, and a lot of people who are completely new to like the whole concept of abolishing private property and anti-imperialism. And it's been an interesting development. I would say the most important thing about the DSA to me is that we're entirely a member-led and member-funded organization. We're a democratic organization. We have national conventions where we elect delegates who make the big decisions. We elect a national political committee at those conventions, and we have various levels of different national committees that handle things like electoral struggle, like labor struggle, international struggle, queer socialist struggle, and so that's what's really important about it to me. I first got involved with the Baltimore chapter a few years ago during I want to say in like 2018 around like police abolition, around organizing for better housing. And I was really pulled in by, it was just the first time I ever saw such an organized resistance, like in terms of numbers. And it's been really sick to see it grow. So I'm pretty dedicated. I do a lot of national work in queer organizing and in Palestine resistance like solidarity organizing. Locally, I lead our trans rights and body autonomy working group. We did focus on trans rights stuff, on abortion access stuff. Maryland, thankfully, is not the worst place for those things. So we've expanded our focus to what we're calling Sanctuary Maryland campaign, where we're really trying to unite the struggles of the groups most targeted by this new administration, especially the groups that had already been, majorly oppressed by the status quo prior to that election. And so the big focus right now is uniting in solidarity, like struggles for protecting trans rights and the conditions that we experience. The threat of like institutions in Maryland cutting access to health care, discriminating against us in their records and in what we get to access. Dealing with prison policy, the abuse that especially trans women experience, incarceration, but also starting to build better connections with groups that are struggling for undocumented people, and now at this point, just people who have visas, people who have green cards, especially students. We were very active with the Johns Hopkins encampment, providing support for that. We brought food, we provided help with security, and now dozens of people have had their visas revoked, and similarly at University of Maryland College Park and other universities in Maryland. So that's become an immediate big focus for us, and it's a big struggle. There's a lot going on. That's been the areas I've been focused on, which was really pulled me away from what I was mostly doing before, which is like Palestine organizing. But thankfully, we do have a working group, Palestine Solidarity Working Group, who's organizing a campaign called Apartheid Free Baltimore, which is like local BDS campaign to get businesses and other institutions to sign on to boycott Israeli products, and to boycott products like organizations in the state of Maryland that profit from Israeli apartheid and the genocide they're waging. And so that's like the thing they're really focused on. We're hoping to eventually have more statewide organizing around repealing the BDS ban, which I know we had a bill in for this legislative session, and just trying to reduce the amount of repression we see in this state, and the profiteering by like projects like the Maryland Israel Development Corporation, or whatever the C stands for. We've had a group that's been really involved with the Tesla takedown organizing. So we've been organizing these protests outside of the Tesla company, the Tesla shop in Owings Mills. That's kind of brought us to organizing a lot more with kind of weird groups that are more recently popped up, like Indivisible. And that's been kind of interesting because a lot of the crowd that shows up for that struggle for fighting for the federal layoffs and stuff, a lot of that crowd is not particularly leftist. They're not particularly internationalist or anti-imperialist. So this is kind of a big task, is to build those relationships, but also build a better analysis of what the problem is. Because if you don't want your country to have a fascist administration that lays off like your entire support infrastructure that like poor people rely on, you have to understand that that's what's going to happen when you have like an imperialist basis for your entire society, when you have a country that's comfortable doing this to other people. And similarly, when we have a country that's comfortable torturing trans women to death in prisons, and when we have a country who treats migrants like subhumans, like this is what we end up with. So that's like a big focus for us right now.
Okay, well, thank you for that and all the work you're doing. So the next question that we had teed up was for anyone who would like to answer it. So we've seen Bernie and AOC on their Fight Oligarchy tour. What kind of impact, if any, would you say that is having? Is it something that you feel like the Democratic establishment is listening to? Any thoughts on the effects of those current efforts?
I've heard that it's already increased fundraising quite a lot. And I think that's actually more a matter of concern than of being optimistic about, because you know that those funds will be channeled to the Democratic Party, as it had happened before. And it's people always will wonder why weren't such rallies being taking place during, you know, the previous administration. We are all controlled. I mean, both parties are controlled by oligarchs. But now we realize that all of a sudden we are controlled by oligarchs. Do AOC and Bernie remember that most billionaires were actually on Kamala's side? So all of a sudden now we have oligarchs to be concerned about. I know that Bernie has been very consistent throughout his career to criticize oligarchs, but it seems that he only takes this kind of initiative to, you know, rally the masses and all that when there is a Republican president. Oligarchy in the US is a matter of concern, no matter who's in power. Trump is just more obvious, more explicit about it. I mean, he's obvious and explicit about all the evil stuff he does. And Democrats tend to do very similar, or if not the same evil things, but with a more subdued tone. So it's interesting that he's reacting now, but I wish he was doing that. You know, it's something that I had pointed out in our previous meeting, that I kind of, you know, it doesn't take a genius to predict that Democrats would go through this phase of collective amnesia, forgetting that many of the things they're criticizing the current government, they were doing all along, and it's happening again. You know, and Bernie and AOC doing this theatrics, it's part of it. I really hope there is an impact in it, but I myself, somebody who, you know, used to admire Bernie a lot and even donated my $5 to his campaign, and now I keep on getting those emails from the Democrats asking for donations. I feel like, you know, he pimped us out. I hope that's not too crude of an expression, but he sold us out, and I'm afraid it's going to happen again, and then again, and then AOC is going to be the, how do you say, the standard bearer of the same kind of sheepdogging of progressive causes back to the Democratic Party. So I am afraid I'm very pessimistic about this. I don't think he's going to do much besides, you know, make people again raise their hopes for basically nothing. We know them already. We've seen them in action. There's nothing new about Bernie and AOC, you know, doing this kind of theatrics. I'm not very optimistic about the real life results of them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Either, I guess, Joseph's off mute. You want to?
Sure. Yeah, I think, you know, it's remarkable that they're drawing large crowds. I think that's important. Just as, you know, the coalition that organized the Hands Off National Day of Action created, right, mass protest. I think that is the minimum that we need to do, is to get people in the streets. And showing that there is, you know, serious concern, enough that a lot of people who normally would not get involved actually take the time to go to a rally or a protest. And look, both Hands Off and, you know, the Bernie tours are on the radar of the administration. So I think that's significant. That being said, these are all really, I think, kickoff events. They're events that will hopefully seed local organizing and building local efforts to challenge power. That's, I think, the real test of whether or not these mobilizations are successful. You know, one big march by itself or one big rally by itself is not going to change anything. The Trump regime will withstand that, but a sustained effort, large gatherings plus local organizing that is networked and coordinated, I think, is what's going to take to beat back the regime at the end of the day. And the other thing I would say is, you know, the value of having large numbers. I think, you know, all of us were feeling pretty, at least I was feeling depressed at the beginning of the this administration, right? We didn't see the Women's March. We didn't see tens of millions of people take to the streets in DC or anywhere else. Really, the streets were empty. And I think people were struggling with what do we do? How do we exercise our power, our individual power, collective power in this moment? And I think the large gatherings have started to awaken people to the fact that there are others like us. And even though we're in a challenging time, we're connected and we can work in concert towards a common goal. So I think that's good. But I would say the key thing to the work that's of the all of the organizing is sustained follow-up organizing. Because we have elections to win if we're going to have them, and we have direct actions that we're going to have to do to tackle the challenges that are ahead of us.
All right, if you had thoughts, yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to be too critical because I haven't watched videos of these rallies. I don't really know what's being said beyond like the fight oligarchy stuff. But I do agree that that's been a message that Bernie has made huge social change in terms of the way people talk about things. And in 2020, the things people wanted, like the things people wanted that really led to a general like left shift in all of the people who ran. Obviously a lot of that was nonsense. Like Biden was the least left signaling person, except for on some economic stuff, and he won. So I'm not sure how effective it is as like an electoral strategy. However, it was kind of nice in 2020 to have most of the candidates support Medicare for all, most of the candidates be, significantly left on immigration than where we're at today. So I do think there's value, but at the same time, like we can't just be operating with the intention of swaying public opinion in the election sphere, because that is like often just basically spineless. We really need to be mobilizing people into immediate actions that have direct impact on the fight that we're in right now. Because elections aren't happening, I mean, there's going to be some elections this year. There's going to be some elections next year, but major like national stuff isn't going to be happening, until next year, and then big stuff in 2028. I'm kind of frustrated because there is this mass mobilization happening. And it is most especially around people who are pissed about the liquidation of the federal government. And I think that that's really important. I don't want to minimize it. But I think if we don't use this, if we don't manage to organize this into a resistance that has an anti-imperialist understanding of why we are where we're at, we're not going to change their demands for the long run. We're not going to change their demands beyond some, public policy shifts on a national level that won't really get at the root of the problem. The fact, I don't know. I think it's really important that Bernie manages to draw large crowds around demands for dealing with wealth inequality. But I do worry that a lot of that's just going to get funneled into election organizing that won't necessarily go to particularly radical candidates. And I don't know, the thing that I'm comparing it to right now is I forget her last name, but Kat, who's running in Chicago. What is her last name? I forget. But she's running for Senate in Chicago, or for the House. I forget. I should remember. But she's using her run as an opportunity to fundraise for mutual aid and to fundraise for local activism. And that's the kind of thing that I really respect. I wish and I hope that this campaign that Bernie Sanders and AOC are on right now, I really hope that they start shifting from this like broad criticism of wealth inequality and towards like much more specific calls to action, especially things that plug people into stuff like that. Like we need to be doing immediate, broad mutual aid. We need to be doing direct protection of people from ICE, and of like trans kids from like in states where they're at risk of being abducted from their parents, and their providers are at risk of going to jail for providing gender affirming care and things like that. And I'm hoping that we can shift a lot of this energy around the hands-off stuff towards just a broader solidarity and more immediate action.
Well, we do have a audience question.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up, especially to what Joseph said, but what all the panelists said. Hal Ginsberg here. Aren't these hands-off rallies really problematic in the sense that the speakers, especially the Democratic speakers, the Congress members, are focusing all of their ire, all of their anger on the Republicans and on Trump. And although they pay lip service to the corruption within the Democratic Party, the warmongering in the Democratic Party, they basically always pivot to deflect it towards Trump and his ilk. And this, in fact, makes things worse, does it not? Because it says that the two choices are two terrible choices. Isn't it time to recognize that the Democratic problem, no less than the Republican Party, is a significant cause of where we are now? And that the only solution is for organizations that have influence, that have donors, that have paid staffers, need to lead their organizations to an emerging party that is pro-worker, unlike the Democrats, that is pro-environment, unlike the Democrats, that is pro-peace, unlike the Democrats.
Exactly.
And so as the answer, I'll just throw on there. The hands-off rallies actually pushed down, they tamped down any mention of the Palestinian genocide, while at the same time, they actually, many of them used the phrase hands-off NATO. So they were actually pushing war at those rallies, pushing war in two ways. Let's not say anything about what Trump is doing, just as the same as what Harris Biden did. And let's try to get war going, gin it up in Ukraine. So for example, you have that very, very terrible example from the rallies. I'd also note that at the rally in LA, AOC made a big deal, and rightly so, about insider trading and all the day trading that many Congress members do. I note that RoCona's net worth is somewhere between 33 and $100 million. And Unusual Whales reported that he and his family are often making 10, 12 trades a day. And this is since the inauguration of Trump. I'm wondering, RoCona, an ally of our revolution, a friend of our revolution, has been asked about this on any of the calls that he has made where he's appeared for our revolution. And with that.
That sounds like a question for Joseph.
I also would like to add something that I have some friends who went in a Baltimore rally that happened, I think, last weekend, and similar sentiments were shared. I think Palestine was mentioned once during that whole rally. It felt, from what I understand, because I was not there, it was explained to me that it felt like a pro-Democrat rally more than anything. There was not really much criticism thrown at the Democratic Party about how they handle the election, how they really failed to address Trump and all that. So yeah, I just wanted to share that.
I would just like to add that.
Before actually, Joseph.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah.
Keep it up there, yes. Oh, go ahead, Joseph. Yeah.
Yeah, look, I agree. I think, Democrats are part of the problem. I think we all see that. We have a party that was complicit in the rise of a global free trade economy that decimated the middle class, decimated unions in the United States. We have a party that takes money from billionaires in the Wall Street elites, and that's what corrupted the Democratic Party. And and it's no different than the Republicans. And I think it's interesting that some Democrats like Neera Tanden are aligning with the bulwark, quote unquote, the bulwark conservative Republicans who are anti-Trump. That being said, you don't see any of them necessarily talking about the problem of money, the corrosive influence of money in our political system. You don't see them renouncing billionaires, and you don't see them saying that we need a better system. And I think that's problematic. If anything, this is a fight not between Democrats and Republicans or black versus white or Latino versus any other group. This is ultimately a fight between those who have a disproportionate amount of wealth and power and want to utilize that to keep us down and to, in fact, de-citizenship us, deplatform us. And so that's the key issue. It's money. And in terms of, Hal asked about like Ro Khanna and, there are Democrats, yes, who take money from big donors. And that is a problem. I don't think billionaires should be allowed in the Democratic Party. I don't think we should allow uh, any of these industries that are regulated by the United States government to subsidize candidates for office. I think that is the fundamental problem. And we allowed those lines to get blurred on the Democratic side, which I think created the conditions precedent for the rise of Trump.
Yeah, Eduardo, I didn't want to cut
Oh,
you
yes, thanks, man. I'm sorry, it was kind of a statement, but it's kind of bragging also because I'm glad to say that Friends of Latin America didn't fall for the old hands-off march. We were there. I mean, our members were in DC with the pro-Palestine, anti-genocide march. Because I think the hands off, first of all, it brings some terrible memories because even though I look extremely young, I was alive 8 years ago when we went through the first Trump administration and there were marches and people tend to forget very easily. Like right now, people are very giddy about this march and all that. But the fact that they managed to make it into a pro-NATO march and almost completely ignore Palestine, that shows that the lessons have not been learned. And that makes me more concerned. Even if there were millions of people out there in the streets, it would make me even more concerned that these people are still very much uneducated about the causes of the current situation. That actually I don't see it as a positive sign that if they managed to do this, ignoring that genocide was a turnoff for many voters, and that nobody who are making living paycheck to paycheck cares about NATO that much. These people are delusional. I'm sorry to say that. And they were delusional 8 years ago, and we're going down the same path. So even though we are a small organization, we work a lot on raising awareness and bringing more knowledge that tends to be ignored in the mainstream media and by many social movements in the US about what's going on in Latin America, because I think we tend to think in a more universal way, because you cannot talk about, for instance, the current genocide against Palestine without taking into consideration the US's role in destroying countries like Syria and Libya and weakening Lebanon and so forth. I don't think the Zionist entity would be so brave against the Palestinians if Obama and Hillary didn't start destroying Syria, which finally happened to come to an end now. A guy who was a terrorist was chopping heads one day. Now European Union and the US are welcoming him with open arms. So we have to think of all these things in an integrated way, but thank you.
Was there another question? All right. So, let's go with, so I guess maybe this is another aspect of the kind of it's not necessarily the rallies, but there's also local things we do like boycotts. Maybe you could comment on the effects or lack of, or your thoughts on how boycotts factor in to our resistance. Yeah, Ida.
Sure. It depends on the boycott. I'm generally really critical of boycotts because they're very hard to pull off effectively. The obvious major exception to that is BDS, the BDS movement. I'm always excited when they add to the BDS list because I know that they actually do the work through partner organizations like us, and PYM and SGB and other organizations to make those boycotts more effective, and they're very targeted. So, they just added Microsoft and they listed specific Microsoft products that they think will be more generally boycottable. They acknowledge that, it's really hard for a lot of people to boycott like Teams or garbage like that because they have to do it for work. But it's, they put out a whole guide of how you could effectively boycott Microsoft. I'm really excited to take part in that because I don't even really think I have the authority to say whether or not it's like gonna be effective. I just believe it will because they're really good at what they do. I also am really excited about the Tesla boycotts. Obviously, I do think they've been really effective. I mean, really just effective in destroying Tesla stock value, and that is a win for its own sake. I think we should be trying to sabotage Elon Musk's money as much as possible, especially things like that that did get a lot of money and probably will continue to get a lot of money despite the obvious hypocrisy from Democrats, because they do see it as I mean, Tesla is a carbon offset scheme. So everybody loves that. Billionaires love that. And they love selling garbage products that break down on people. There's also a budding Starbucks boycott that the union is pushing. And that is a court that's being done in a bigger strategy that includes their very aggressive unionizing campaign and their demonstrated willingness to strike and to obstruct business. So they did coordinated actions like a month or 3 weeks ago. Some people got arrested at the store in Chicago. They're really ramping up the pressure, and I think that's something we need to support. And the fact that they're combining a boycott with a strike, and that or as a union organizing with other unions to coordinate those type of things. And they also built a trans rights action committee track that's really trying to put union resources into the legislative and other like political struggles for trans stuff. So I think that unions are very hard to pull off. I mean, no, excuse me. I think boycotts are really hard to pull off, but if we can do it, it can be effective.
I think if we come to think of it, I think the fact that many people walk away from the Democratic Party is a type of boycott as well. I think people are boycotting the Democrats because the quality of the product they're selling is terrible, because they lie to their customers. I think people are boycotting the Democratic Party. Now we have to come up with an option to the Democratic Party. And I think many people are still in this state of denial that there's still way to fix it, and there's still way to, and worse than that, there are people who are still working on that idea that, oh, Hillary was right. Oh, there are people still thinking that so many years later, and that Miss Harris was like the great candidate, and she was defeated because of people's prejudice against her, not knowing that she was a terrible corporate pro-genocide candidate. And I think that's a boycott. I think many people say, you know what, I'm not going to even vote. Trump didn't win. Kamala lost. I think that's more a way of seeing it. He's taking this as a huge mandate. Yeah, it is, because the Democrats screwed up so much that he got everything they always wanted. But it's not necessary that people are going all full-blown fascist towards Trump. Is that people are disillusioned with the other option, which unfortunately is only one. I always like to point out that when I was growing up back in my home country under a dictatorship, we only had two parties as well. And that was a dictatorship. Even though one of them was cruel, was killing people, disappearing with people, the other one wasn't very efficient either. It's the same situation we have now. We used to say there's this yes party and the yes sir party, and I think that's basically what we have in the US.
Yeah, Joseph came off mute.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on or follow what Ada said. I do think the Tesla actions have been very effective. At the end of the day, what the oligarchs, the billionaires are engaged in is an economic transaction. They are looking to pad their bottom line. How? Well, the US government is the biggest purchaser of goods and services in the private sector economy. Elon Musk, right, he got started by getting a loan guarantee program grant under Obama Biden in 2008, 2009. And I remember at the time I was in the labor movement and working on the transition and met with the Department of Energy staff that was about to award the grant. And I said, well, have you guys looked at, you're about to give this company $400+ million loan guarantees. Are you putting any strings on it in terms of community impact, in terms of types of jobs created, in terms of any of the things that environmental impact? And the answer was no. We've got Nobel laureates advising us on the science. We're making sure that the company's well capitalized. It was an MBA response, not a people forward response that we would expect. So that being said, right, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, all of these oligarchs, their business model depends on contracts, loans, grants, regulatory approvals, and other sources of revenue and or regulation from the United States government. That's what they want. So to the extent that we can cost them money, whether it's through boycotts, through Tesla pro, that's when they wake up, right? That's when they pay attention, is when their stock prices tank or when they don't get approval to build pipelines or get another funding for rocket to Mars. That being said, I had one of my researchers do analysis on Musk's ROI. He spent 290 million on getting Trump elected. The ROI, the return on investment, is 40,000%. He's gotten $117 billion worth of contracts and loans and regulatory approval. So that is the challenge here, right? Because he is inside, he's directing business to his companies, he's taking out competitors, and he's boosting his net worth. And until we figure out how to stop that money pipeline, I think these oligarchs are going to go for broke. And, so to the extent that we can find boycotts that work, actions that work, but at the end of the day, we have to stop Elon Musk from getting a $60 billion broadband contract that's up this summer. We have to stop Blue Origin from getting contracts for rocket ships, et cetera. Because the goal of these oligarchs is to privatize and plunder the US government and make money out of our tax dollars, right? Cut Medicaid, cut health, education, and then funnel that into their pockets. It is the easiest way to get rich. The easiest way to get rich in the United States is to be a contractor for the United States government. And that's what the oligarchs have figured. This is a massive scam. That is, our theory of winning can't just be mobilization unless it's mobilization that impacts their bottom line, their ability to operate, their social license, and what's acceptable. That's where we have to be, I think, strategic. So following the money is, as Ida said with the Tesla thing, I think is a really good example, and doing strategic boycotts that will have a tangible impact on the economics of the industry or the firm. I think that's what gets executives to wake up.
So maybe following up on, I'm sorry, go ahead. Yes.
No.
If you have a question, we'd love to hear from you.
I was just gonna say, I know that there's been, and was mentioned earlier about, they could deport American citizens and stuff like that. So if you're a green card holder or you're a visa holder and you want to go to a protest or something like that, what would you tell someone who's worried about that? And how can we kind of overcome the fear and the chilling effect that these actions are having that don't seem to be in accordance with the law in terms of silencing people's freedom of speech?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think there are organizations that are working actively in producing training materials for these people. CASA in Maryland is one of them. I've seen even like materials produced in indigenous language from Latin America for, moms, speakers, and so forth. So I think these organizations will provide the guidance that you need. You can find those pamphlets online. And I think if you are able to download it and distribute it, I think that would be great.
Yeah, it's kind of consistent with kind of our next question. Like, what organizations would the three of you recommend that are doing good work in this space, in addition to your own?
I think in Maryland, especially, CASA is one that's very active. CASA, CASA. It's, I think it's the largest immigrant justice organization on this side of the country. And they're very active now, especially. But of course, there are smaller organizations that are doing a good work as well. And some of them are allies at FOA. So if you guys go to our website, you can find information not only on the situation of immigrants here, but the situation that brought them to be here in the first place. Because I think that's also something that tends to be lost in the conversation, right? People wonder, what are immigrants doing here? Nobody's here just, for Disney and Mickey Mouse. People are here for a reason. Sometimes their countries have been destroyed by policies that our government has implemented. So we need to, again, to see all of this in a more integrated way. But yes, I would say that organizations like CASA and they work closely with, I can't remember the name of that organization. Oh man. But again, if you go to their website, you can see all that information.
Okay, and Ida, you said it looks like you had your hand up. You had some organizations you were thinking about.
Yeah, CASA is definitely like the core of all of this in Baltimore and in the Baltimore area that I'm aware of. And I know a lot of sort of more discreet organizing around safety and things like that. Like there's been a lot of smaller, less formal, like little organizations that I've come across in Baltimore. And like our chapter has been doing a lot of distributing Know Your Rights materials in different languages. I think like nationally, the organization I've been seeing the most, like just the most coming out about all of this has been CARE, the Center for American Islamic Relations. They've been doing a great job of tracking like the national situation with like visa revoking happening. And I really appreciate it because it's like they are broadening their coverage tremendously to take this all on. And like we're definitely as an organization like relying on them and their ability to do that in a big way. Regarding like other affected groups in Maryland, like we work with the Trans Rights Advocacy Coalition, which is like a sort of grassroots collaboration of folks at like Public Justice Center, our organization, Free State Justice, and nationally, we really like haven't been getting a lot of like LGBT organizations doing a whole lot that I'm aware of. I know like the A4TE, I forget exactly what that stands for. They're trying to prepare for as much legal battles as they can. The ACLU has been doing a lot on both fronts, on immigration and on trans rights. And the one area I'm like most hoping to see more growth in is like organizing with incarcerated folks, like on all of these things. Like it's when when Elsie Noemi Barrios was taken in Westminster, it was really hard to figure out like what was happening with her. Like we knew they took her to Central PA. I reached out to the DSA chapter up there to try to get in contact with her to try to get more information, because the saddest thing about like this stuff is like it is dangerous to bring more attention onto this, like to bring more attention onto people who are at risk. And so I really respect organizations like CASA that are able to do that work. And like as an organization outside of that, I think it's like we just need to take every opportunity to support that.
Oh, yes, definitely Black Alliance.
Oh, audience never mentioned Black Alliance for Peace for everyone online.
And also ACLUA. That's the organization I was trying to remember. They work closely with CASA and they all have this very good Know Your Rights materials that we should make sure, it's widespread.
And Joseph, you had some you wanted to mention?
Well, I was just going to say it's, what's happening to activists, with, who don't have citizenship status right now, I think is a warning, right? And broader than that, right? They're going after universities, they're going after the lawyers, the law firms, right? Donald Trump is using his state power, right, to really organize the centers of American society, whether it's academia, the legal profession, entertainment, the media. All of this creates, I think, a challenge. So when it comes to immigrants being uh, taken away, that is really just the first step. If we don't oppose it now, it's going to keep giving this regime the green light to push the boundaries. And, it's challenging. This is an incredible, I never would have imagined uh, that we would have ended up in a place like this. I never, my father and mother who were immigrants, I don't think they would have made a decision to immigrate to the United States and have me here because this was the type of thing they wanted to get away from. And it's incredibly challenging, but it's on us at this point uh, to really draw a line. And I think there will be costs, both personally and organizationally, to groups that continue to resist the administration and fight back. But we've got to give those groups power. The one example I wanted to just throw out, a group doing really good work that just got taken down, at least temporarily, is Greenpeace. Kelsey Warren, who's the CEO of Energy Transfer, major Trump donor. He was at the inauguration with the rest of the oligarchs, right? Sued Greenpeace and is basically putting them out of business as a result of the judgment, hundreds of millions of dollars for engaging in organizing with indigenous communities to engage in peaceful protest. And that I think is a sign of what is to come. They're going to use every single mechanism possible to come after organizations, groups, individuals who speak up and act up strategically against the regime. So it's it's a real concern. But I don't think there's any easy answer except to say the more of us that stand up, the better off we are.
Kind of continuing on the idea of, state-sponsored, work against our government agencies. So terrorism as a Malik.
Sponsored terrorism.
So one of the biggest obvious elephants of the room is Doge and what they're doing kind of behind the scenes or blatantly in front of the scenes. What would you say right now is the kind of the biggest threat that they pose, and what would you suggest that we could do about it?
I don't think I know what the biggest threat is. I mean, I think there's a lot of threats, meaning we've got people going into the back end of very complicated systems that were set up to not be integrated, so it wouldn't concentrate information and power in the hands of any one bureaucrat or elected official. So we're seeing that, we have a threat of systems breaking down, of checks not going out, Americans not getting the benefits they deserve or are owed. But the other part that I'm more concerned about is the things that we don't see. I mean, Elon Musk and the Silicon Valley oligarchs have an interest in developing unaccountable artificial intelligence. And you can imagine right. I mean, the New York Times just had a piece this weekend. The government's got at least 300 separate data points on all of us, right? If we signed up for a passport, if we've applied for a student loan, if we were on Medicaid at some point, you can imagine the level of data. And so Elon Musk is a businessman. He's not here for government efficiency. He's here to maximize his bottom line. He's got a company that is an AI company, and you can imagine all of this information getting funneled into all of this data getting funneled into this machine that then is able to further violate our privacy and trample our rights. That is my biggest fear. There is we are creating the conditions precedent for a big brother, a big sister, right? Some entity that has incredible amounts of information about each of us, and violates our right to privacy and can weaponize our engagement with the government against us in ways we haven't even imagined.
Is that your hand, Ida, or?
Yeah, I think for the thing that I'm most concerned about in the immediate is what they're doing with Social Security, because they're going to destroy like people getting their payments, but also they're deleting like they're using it as a way to punish migrants. They're like just declaring people dead so that they can't use their Social Security number anymore, to cut them off from their their banked money, to cut them off from government services and from using anything that requires your social security number. I think that's the kind of thing that we should not expect to be limited. Not that it really matters; it's already bad, but we should not expect it to people where they have like more legal justification that they could abuse. I think it's something that we should expect them to do to anybody they have a political motivation to abuse. And I am concerned about what Joseph said. Like they're definitely exporting information. They're trying to create an ultra API that can access everything so that they can export everything for their private control. Because if they can't gain full control of the security state, which I think I don't know if they can, but I know they're having some trouble. I think they already have pretty much like total compliance within the FBI, but like they're going for everything. And if they can't, I think their goal is to have all of that data for their own private use, so that they can use the private sector to terrorize people as they please. So that's like the long-term thing I'm most worried about. And I think like the thing we have to consider necessary to deal with that is like if we manage to get these people out of power, we need to destroy them. Like this is a threat that they will have over all of us for the rest of our lives if we don't figure out how to destroy that power.
So, continuing kind of on that thread, once they have this power, we need to work together to support our, local community, particularly those that are, most marginalized. So what would you guys would suggest local actions as far as trying to help those of us that are most, particularly affected? I'm thinking, trans, immigrant, LGBTQ. Love to get any thoughts on those. Go ahead, Ada.
Sure, I think like at least 50% of what we spend our time doing as a movement has to be mutual aid. There's just no excuse. We need to be taking care of each other as much as we possibly can. And that needs to be, that needs to be intersectional. That needs to be people taking care of each other who face different challenges, who receive different attacks. And right now, I think more than perhaps ever, it is dangerous. We do have to worry about surveillance, and not just public, but private surveillance. But I think that that's really important, because it's a big part of resistance. You have to survive, and your comrades have to survive. So we need to do what we can to keep each other well. And here, fighting evictions, fighting deportations, fighting criminalization of people for being who they are. The other half of that is like we need to be doing everything we can to change policy where we can. Like we need to be trying to change as much as we can about the way our municipalities, the way our states work. There is opportunity. It's not like we can fix everything. It's not like we're not going to deal with betrayal. It's not like we're not going to deal with hitting dead ends because of like the severe degree of corruption and all of that. But like it's something that we have to be doing, to be protecting our communities as much as we possibly can. And I don't know, the other thing is unions. We need people like these networks of mutual support need to be material. They need to be based in the place where you get power from your relationships. And they need to be national, and really they need to be international. So I think even with like the legal powers of unions, the legal protections that unions have, they're being very much at risk right now. There's still power in unions, and we need as much mass organization as we can get. Like I think the CWA, Communication Workers of America's video game union code announced that they will take members like anybody. And you like the independent developers can now join, people who work in non-union shops can join and then SALT, but they get full union membership rights immediately as long as they're paying dues. That's the kind of thing like we need to be doing with the labor movement right now is increasing it and improving its internal organization and politicization as much as possible.
I think those of us who, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Those of us who have the privilege of having citizenship, I don't know, as an immigrant, I don't know how long that's going to last. We should do what many activists in a situation that's more vulnerable. We should make sure we do what they can't do and protect them when they're trying to do something. And I think I've heard of these networks of people keeping in touch on where the ICE teams are. And I think that's a nice way of sabotaging them. I think even getting a loudspeaker, if you were a citizen and you have no warrants against you, and just making sure your neighborhood knows that those people are around. Like small actions like that to show people that, they can count on their neighbors, because I think the local level is where, we may actually create some sort of resistance to this. And I think just to encourage civil disobedience as much as you can. I think, for instance, I just heard that a certain university, which I'm not going to mention, told their staff to not interfere if ICE comes. If you're a college professor, if you work for a university, I think you are in a position of relative privilege, and you should use that relative privilege to protect those people. So yeah, we have to encourage civil disobedience as much as possible.
Yeah, when we talk about self-help, when we talk about boycotts, what we're acknowledging is the political system has failed. That the change cannot come from our representatives, that democracy is not in effect in our country anymore. And in fact, this point was made at the rally in Los Angeles when Maxwell Frost said we need to get out in the streets, implicitly saying we're not going to change things in Congress. When AOC says there's so much corruption in Congress, of course, it's all on the Republican side, but there's so much corruption that we can't have good things like Medicare for all. So we have both implicit and explicit recognition that the political system as it's currently constituted has failed us. So again, I go back to actually the two leaders from the two organizations, DSA and Our Revolution. Are you prepared to cut your close ties, especially our DSA also, to the Democratic Party? I know there were DSA leaders in Pennsylvania knocking doors for Congress, as were OR representatives. As far as I know, neither group got anything for it. No promises were made, just as there's complaints that the Democrats gave favors to Musk and got nothing in return. Likewise, DSA, Our Revolution activists, maybe they didn't endorse Kamala, but they helped her without getting anything in return. So I'm asking if there's any chance either of the organizations are prepared to make a public break with the Democratic Party to start working to build an effective third party or emerging party. And I'll just end with this. I know there are two DNC members on the Our Revolution board. Does that fact mean that you simply cannot, will not break publicly with the Democratic Party?
Go ahead, Ida.
Yeah, so there's a lot of energy in the DSA to do just that. There are a lot of chapters that have like rules that they don't run people as Democrats. To be honest, I disagree with that. The Democratic ballot line is one of the only two ballot lines that you can run on in a lot of states. And I am a Leninist. I agree with what Lenin said in Left-Wing Communism in his chapter, Should We Participate in Bourgeois Parliaments? There is no excuse not to when there is like growth that you can achieve within those reactionary systems. That doesn't mean that your agents that you have in there should be excused for making terrible decisions that harm people. They shouldn't be. It doesn't also mean that we're going to make big changes from within the system, but we have to follow an inside-outside strategy. We have to be prepared to interfere with reactionary developments in the government where we can, and in democratic committees, any institutions where we can. But that doesn't mean that that's everything. Alternate and like dealing with the idea of like DSA members canvassing for Harris. That wasn't something, that wasn't like a DSA policy. We didn't fund or support or tell people to do that on a national scale. But we are a democratic organization. People do like we're not going to like police what people do. Although we have had members kicked out of chapters for supporting candidates that people decided were too heinous, and the process led to them getting in trouble for that. But I think that's I don't know for sure. There's been major disagreements in the organization about things like endorsing. I forget her name, but there's a councilwoman in LA who I agree should be expelled. There's a lot of that kind of stuff, but it is a democratic organization. So when we talk about like what is DSA prepared to do, that has to mean, what gets passed at convention that the NPC is now obligated to do. That means you have to organize the numbers to make that happen. And I support what the organization does generally. Like if people were to, decide we're making a clean break now, which is what a lot of people in the DSA want, I would support that as long as we could follow that up with a meaningful strategy for how we're going to build that third party. I think right now we're closer than ever to that being a possibility, in large part because we have a much more politicized labor, union situation in this country. We have major union leaders who are supporting that idea. We also have a relatively strong working families party. We have a relatively strong DSA. We have a relatively strong Our Revolution. We have a relatively strong socialist or socialist leaning bloc in the NGO and in the Democrat influencer and in the mass mobilizing sector of our political world. So I think it's more possible than ever. I fully support wherever we can, breaking, like on local ballot lines, like places where we've passed, what's it called, ranked choice voting, for instance, where we can really make bigger moves for running third party people. And I think that there's lots of situations where we absolutely should do that. But in the end, we have to understand that the party system in this country is basically an enforced coalition scheme where it just isn't possible to run a third party person in a lot of races, especially big ones. But where we can and where it serves us, we should. And whatever ballot lines we get people elected on, they need to be caucusing together. And the biggest thing that I think has been lacking in our endorsements and in the way that we've engaged in electoral politics has been failing to really organize the organizational presence in what the decisions those candidates make, and in the kind of discipline and in the kind of support that we provide to those candidates. We have resulted in lots of little scandals and lots of we've had to unendorse people, and it would be ideally we wouldn't have this situation because we would have started off with a much stronger program. And so that's what we really need now. And I think we're headed that direction. And but it's not going to be it's not the solution. Winning big is great in the electoral system. Having more presence is great. But the real purpose of doing that is that is a terrain where powerful decisions get made, and we are obligated to be there to interfere with bad decisions and to support good. That's a limited sphere, though, and we need to be mass organizing and labor in the streets, etc., so that we can build towards a mass party that is more than just an electoral party, but is a party that can cause a political revolution in this country.
And I know, Joseph, we need to evacuate the space soon, but I know Joseph wanted to respond to that question as well.
Yeah, look, it's not that the Democratic Party is a perfect vehicle. It's not. It's kind of like Donald Trump's, takeover. He was able to pick a weak target and take it over. And that's what Donald, right? He came out of nowhere and pushed aside the Republican establishment and moved a new agenda, right? The Republican Party of today is not the Republican Party of the Bushes. And I think that's pretty significant. He saw a vehicle to gain power. And that's, part of the strategy on our side is can we take over the Democratic Party and guide it to a different place? We have not been able to successfully. We have in some places, but not necessarily at the national level. That being said, if there is a viable path to win with third parties at the local level or people running as independents, I think we should do it, right? Whatever it takes to seize the reins of power, we should be committed to. So that's, would be my response to that is, the Republican, I'm sorry, the MAGA movement effectively hijacked the party and then hijacked our government. And we have not been able to do so yet. And we've got to figure that out, whether it's through third party effort or through the Democratic Party effort. But the Democratic Party as it exists right now is really a shit show, right?
Well, on that happy note, so want to first thank the panelists. Appreciate your time and your expertise this evening. There's claps going on in the audience. I see some claps going on online. Malik had a
Yes.
Go ahead.
So I want to kind of expand on something you said earlier about a local university and how staff was set basically not to interfere if ICE shows up. Speaking of which, Howard County Superintendent released a letter a few months ago, basically saying the same thing. So, if anyone disagrees with that, I would recommend showing up at the Board of Education to, express why you think this might be a good or bad idea, whatever you guys feel like. We can put information out about how to sign up for testifying. I think there's a 4 p.m. slot and a 7 p.m. slot for whatever the testifying date is. And even if you don't get a slot, you can show up and support. And I also want to add about the last question about what can we do locally to protect marginalized communities. Maybe if you know anyone in your community who's leaning with the same politics as you, people who might need a little more support. Maybe invite people over for dinner one day. Maybe get to know your neighbor, like start a conversation. A lot of friends that I know in the activist space are, now talking about doing, weekly or monthly dinners, just doing things where we can bond as a community. Because if you only show up when things are on fire, okay, sure, but those bonds may not be as strong as if you're there to help each other, like look after each other's kid. If someone has to go to work early or something, if you show up just for like, I don't know, picnics, your friends' children's baseball games, whatever. What I'm trying to say is it's important to build community in everyday life because that way those community bonds will help you face whatever trials and tribulations that show up later on the line. Just something to think about, guys. That's all.
Yeah, well, that's a much happier note to end on. The library is going to start making announcements that you don't have to go home, but please leave. So thank you all for coming, and we're going to shut everything down. Appreciate it, everyone. Have a
Wait,
good
can
night.
I say one more thing? Can I say one more
Oh,
thing? Sorry.
okay.
I just wanted to plug that the Hopkins Justice Collective is organizing fundraising for the students who've had their visas revoked, and I would super appreciate. I'm trying to find the QR code, but it's on their Instagram. I'm just gonna post that. And I also want folks to know, we just passed the Protect Sensitive Locations legislation that makes it technically illegal for ICE to force their way into what's considered non-public spaces in what's considered sensitive locations, which includes hospitals, schools, places of worship, some other places. And I just want, that's something we need to be doing right now is getting the enforcement for that underway. So we need to get our municipal governments and our state government to start actually enforcing that. We need to get sensitive locations like hospitals, schools, and places of worship to understand that they are not legally required to let ICE enter sensitive location, non-public parts of their buildings, like any closed doors really, without a warrant. that's just something that we have like some power to do right now.
Well, thanks, and we'll definitely get that information out. So,
Thank you, panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robert, for running this meeting. Sorry for being like.
all right.
Oh, yeah.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Hey, guys, please take a look at our website, Friends of Latin America.
We're having an event on Nicaragua.
Thank you. Thank
Oh
you.
yeah.
Good talking to you guys.
So